Hello everyone, welcome to this week's theme video on Heywood's Fantomina. I think there are 3 or 4 themes that I'm going to be touching on in this video. The first of which is the theme of theater. We know that's where the story begins, for example, and as we think about theater in this story, I want us to have a sense of what 18th century theater looked like. We're no longer in the realm of Shakespearean theater, in which we're mainly in outdoor theaters that are outside of the city in a seedy neighborhood next to bear baiting gardens and the like. Theater has now evolved into something that is essentially indoors and is also catering to the upper classes. You'll notice that this theater looks very grand, beautiful, expensive. We're no longer in like the outdoor Globe, for example. Furthermore, you'll notice the setup of this theater in which, whether you're in a box here or if you're in the pit, you aren't just looking at the stage. You're also looking all around you. The entire theater is lit. It's not like when we go to the theater today and you can only see the stage and nothing else. Nope, the lights are on everywhere. So you can see up here in the pit, you can see around you. In the boxes, you can see around you. In the pit, you can see the stage. You can see all of it. So going to the theater in the 18th century is not just about seeing the play. It's about seeing who's there. It's about being seen. In fact, you're in a box. Let's say you're wealthy. You're in a box leaning over, not just to see, but to be seen. So there's something acutely social and self-conscious about theater as a location in 18th century England that I want us to keep in mind when we think about theater in this story. So with that said, why do you think the story begins here? How does it relate to the young woman's journey in the story? And how does this theatrical theme relate to theories of the novel? I'm thinking of the Hillis Miller theme in particular. I'd love to hear your thoughts on those questions. Moving on to our next theme. Identity is something that is carefully explored in this novel. For one, because our central character, the young woman, has no name. So in that sense, she doesn't seem to have a stable identity that we can point to in concrete terms because she simply has no name. Why do you think that's the case? Why do you think Heywood made sure not to give our young woman a name? And instead, throughout the story, she assumes the name and the role of numerous disguises that she creates. She starts with Fantomina, the sex worker. She moves on to become Celia, the maid. She later becomes a widow, the widow bloomer. And then finally, she becomes Incognita, which is hardly a name. It only describes the fact that she has no face. So in fact, no face and no name. This is very interesting to me. What do you think it says about this story and about this character? That number one, she has no name herself. She takes on numerous identities of her own creation. And then her final disguise is a faceless, we could even say basically nameless woman. What's the point of all this? What is the author saying about this woman's experiences? What is she saying about women's experience more generally? Now, in addition to that question, why do you think these are the 4 roles that the young woman assumes? Why Fantomina, Celia, widow bloomer, Incognita? Why a sex worker, a maid, a widow? And why the faceless woman at the end? And I think this could say as much about our young woman as it does about Beauplaisir. Why do you think she chooses these roles to appeal to Beauplaisir? How do they appeal to Beauplaisir? And what does that suggest about Beauplaisir? Now, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself because this is really on the next slide as well. But I do want us to think carefully about these 4 identities and what we could notice. Think about how these identities signify, what class these identities are, and how that matters. And now we'll get to Beauplaisir. So one question that often plagues readers of this novel or novella is, why do you think Beauplaisir never recognizes the young woman? I think even Heywood is aware that people are going to be wondering that because she directly answers this question on her own terms on page 619, second paragraph. So keep your eye out for that. But what do you think? Is this totally unrealistic, or is there perhaps a grain of truth here? That this Beauplaisir would never recognize her. Why do you think that is? I'll keep going. What does Beauplaisir's ignorance about who the young woman is, suggests about his character, or even about the men of Haywood's social class. She seems to be offering a kind of indictment of the men in her social circles. Now, a question for you that kind of follows from this is, do you root for the young woman in her perpetual quest to seduce Beauplaisir in disguise? Or do you pity Beauplaisir? Do you think he's being taken advantage of in unfair and unjust ways? I'll ask this in another form. Do you see the young woman as a feminist? Or do you see her as a kind of revenger based on her first sexual experience with Beauplaisir? Do you see her as a woman who owns and persistently pursues her own sexual desires? These are all questions I'm fascinated with, and I've heard such a range of answers from students. So I'm really eager to hear what you think about this young woman. If she's a hero to you, a kind of badass feminist, or if she's something more sinister that you feel uncomfortable with. And now as I move to the ending, I'm just warning you, spoiler alert, if you don't want this spoiled, save this until you've read the story. Moving my head. Okay, so the ending has a lot of shocks to it. I mean, lots of shocking things happen. Why do you think it ends in this way? We have the young woman suddenly becoming pregnant. We have the young woman's mother returning. This is all kind of happening all at once. And we have the young woman ultimately being exiled to a French convent. This is like a real bummer of an ending, right? The young woman has been able to do everything she wanted in this story so far until everything gets shut down at the end. Why do you think this story ends in this kind of tragic way? What is Heywood trying to accomplish? Is she condemning her protagonist for her protagonist's bad behavior? Or do you think she's saying something about, the plight of women, in which we had a woman in this story who, in some ways, you could say, behaved like a man. She chose to pursue her sexual desires and have sex with whoever she wanted, even though this was a single person. But unlike her sex partner, Beauplaisir, at the end of the story, she gets pregnant. She can't escape that in a way that he can escape it. And she has to deal with the consequences of her mother in a way that Beauplaisir does not have to deal with as well. So what do you think Heywood is trying to illustrate by this kind of ending? Is she trying to say something about the inequitable condition of women in relation to men, about the way women are punished for having sex? I would really like to hear your thoughts on these questions. I think this story presents so many great questions to think about. I will see you over at the discussion board this week, and I'm really looking forward to it.